Hello, word weavers and anybody else who happens to be listening. My name is Eva Marie Everson. I'm the president of Word Weavers International. I finally have a name for this. I'm calling it Eva Marie and the Experts. And today's expert is my good friend, Jerry B. Jenkins. You may have heard of him. He's a best-selling author. He's working, he told me, on his 200th book right now. He's got 71 million copies in print of his work. He's also the father of Dallas Jenkins, who we're all hearing a lot about. Look how his eyes were just shining right there. I know you were so proud of him. But let me just say this, because we go way back to an almost embarrassing incident. But I really got to know you when I was working for you at the Jerry B. Jenkins Christian Writers Guild. And then also, you invested your heart and your finances into Word Weavers during the 2011-2012 period, and then kind of, threw the little eaglets out of the nest and said, fly, little birds, fly. I can never thank you enough for how you saw into that vision and helped us with that. But what you're doing now, and this is what we want to talk about today, is the different writing courses that you have, which are just so amazing to me. And I just want to go through them a little bit with you, and you can tell us a little bit about them and why each one is so different and what the writers might want to look into when they are exploring these courses. And we're going to start with the Jerry Jenkins Writers Guild, which apparently is a little different than the Jerry B. Jenkins Christian Writers Guild.
Right. Yeah, the Writers Guild is really for anybody who wants to learn to write. We don't say that it's Christian, although most people know that I am, and they know where I'm coming from. But I tell people, if you're a person of faith or not, if you want to learn to write, that's what we teach. And no one should feel pressured by joining or think they're going to get, knocked over the head with our beliefs. We don't apologize for them. As I say, people know where I'm coming from. But I really want to just give back. Mm-hmm. And I've had a dream career. I know that. And I'm still writing. That's the one thing I'm glad you mentioned, because I don't want to be that guy who used to write and now teaches. I mean, I think that's okay, but I'm a guy who's still writing and teaching. And I love to be involved in the game itself, but it's great fun to teach.
So how is that different than, say, the novel blueprint or the nonfiction blueprint, which is another entity that you have, or another writing?
Well, the Writers Guild is a monthly subscription, or people can do it annually too. But every month we offer 4 new features. We have a master class where I interview experts and ask them the questions that you'd ask if you had the chance. I have a live online workshop on various topics, but I teach for about a half an hour, and then we have a half hour of phone in, questions, live questions. Mm-hmm. Then we have office hours, which is a 1-hour show, which is only questions and answers. And people seem to really enjoy that, and I really do too. The questions are always really invigorating to me. And then I do what I call a thick-skin manuscript critique clinic, or manuscript repair and rewrite. And I take the first page of some member's nonfiction book, or the first page of some member's fiction book. Actually, now I'm doing both of those each month, 1 page from each. And I show how I would edit it and rewrite it so that it would hopefully change from a rejection to an acceptance. And I also tell all the reasons I make those changes. And that's people's favorite training that I do, because they say, we learn a lot of theory and we hear a lot in class, and we get rejected, but we don't know what really to do. And I'm saying, look, here's why this didn't work. Here's how you eliminate redundancies and cliches, and you eliminate on-the-nose writing and all that type of thing. So that's kind of a fun one. But those are the 4 features we offer each month in the Writers Guild, and those are all archived too. So I've been doing this for 6 years now. So if somebody joined today, it's around $45 a month, I think, is where we are at this point. They would have access to all that archived material for the last 6 years, besides the new ones we do each time. So we really think it's a great bargain.
Yeah, that, I mean, that is. But what about the novel blueprint or the nonfiction blueprint? How is that different? What is
Yeah,
that specifically?
I would say that those are to the Writers Guild what um, say a microscope would be to a wide angle lens.
Mhm.
With the Writers Guild, we're looking at all things writing, fiction, nonfiction. You can do everything from dialogue to character development and in nonfiction research and that type of thing. We might cover anything that has to do with writing. If you're a member of the nonfiction blueprint, you're going to get dozens and dozens of videos that I've done in the training. And it's a deep dive. And whether you're starting with an idea that you have already had for a novel or trying to come up with one, we walk you through that from the idea stage to the printed page. And so we can't guarantee you're going to get your book published or that you'll be a bestseller, but we can guarantee you're going to get everything I know about how to do it. And I've done it. 2/3 of my 200 books have been novels. The other third, obviously, nonfiction. And the nonfiction blueprint, same thing, dozens and dozens of videos, but it's a very specific deep dive into walking you through writing your nonfiction book. So that's the difference.
I love the next course, which is called Dreamer to Writer, because you can dream anything, but then you've got to do
Yeah.
it. So tell us about the Dreamer to Writer course.
Yeah, one of my adages, and I'm not sure it's original. I probably would love to take credit for it, but somebody could point out that somebody said this in 1936 or whatever. But I always like to say, dreamers talk about writing, and you and I both know a lot of those.
Yes, we do.
Writers, yeah, writers write.
Right.
And so the whole course is to say, all right, it's okay to dream. We all need a dream. And you want to shoot for something. But if it's only a dream, you're never going to do it. You're going to
Mhm.
talk about it. You'll be going to writers' conferences for the rest of your life. You'll have half a manuscript you around with you. If you want to become a writer, we're going to go from dreamer to author by saying, here's how you do it, sit down and do it. There's no shortcuts. People say, well, I'm a procrastinator. Well, so am I.
Yeah.
I'm the king of procrastinators. I sharpen pencils I haven't used since fourth grade. I tidy up my office when nobody's even coming over,
Right.
find all kinds of reasons to delay starting. But if you keep your deadline sacred and you write enough pages per day to make your deadline, you'll have a finished manuscript in the end. And that's what we want to get you to, going from dreamer to author.
Robert Benson in his book, Writing on the Head of, or Dancing on the Head of a Pen, I'm sorry, Dancing on the Head of a Pen, talks about that period in his life when he just kept putting off the writing and putting off the writing. But he had the best polished silver in the entire city of Nashville, and all of his linen was pressed. And yeah, we all know that there, we sit and we look at the blank page or the blank screen and we think, oh, there's surely something that needs to be dusted, but that's not going to get the book written. You've got to sit down and you've got to get started, which leads me to the next course, and that's the Jumpstart series. What is that?
Well, that's for members of the Guild. And once they get in there, they get those Jumpstart courses free. I mean, we sell those too. If you're not a member of the Guild, you can buy them. I think they're $150 a piece or something like that. But really, it's a way to say, all right, you want to write fiction? We can get you started. Do you have an idea? Do this first. And it's, simple things like, people have such trouble getting started. Even I, as I mentioned, I do. So I trick myself. I say, today, all I'm going to do is format my pages because I have to format the pages for a manuscript. And I'm going to get my title page down, my name on there, maybe my copyright line, my dedication, an epigram, a little poem, something, a foreword, maybe some acknowledgments. The acknowledgments will change when you finish because you'll have
Sure.
involved an editor and proofreaders and that type of thing. But just get those 5 or 6 pieces of front matter done. You might spend a couple hours and you might only write a few hundred words because that's all it is. But then print those out. Now you've got 6 pages. It sounds silly, but it's momentum. You've started. And the next day you can say, look, I'm just going to write my first page of my first chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And if you feel like keeping going, keep going. And pretty soon you've got a chapter. And before you know it, you've got a manuscript.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What about, and this is something that I just perked right up at when I saw it, the self-editing masterclass, not just a self-editing class, but a self-editing masterclass.
Yeah, this is really the workshop that I talked about manuscript repair and rewrite on steroids. I've got 21 tips that I use in self-editing. I want to teach people to become ferocious self-editors. So many people say to me, with all those books you've had published, how much did that cost for editors and for printing and for all this stuff? And I say, it might sound old-fashioned, but I've never paid one penny for any of those services. I'm traditionally published. In other words, I send my manuscript to a publisher and it lives or dies on its merits. Now, today you need a platform. I realize that. Fortunately, my writing gave me a built-in platform by the time that trend came along. Nowadays, I tell people, yeah, you really do need a blog and an author page, and you need to start building your tribe. But I want to teach you to do your own editing. Now, that doesn't mean you're the last editor. I self-edit ferociously. I tear things up and put them back together. And then I send it to the publisher and they assign a copy editor to it. And I rely on those people. I always want that second pair of eyes on my stuff. But before we send it in, people say, well, how am I going to find an editor? I might lead you to a critiquer, somebody who can counsel you, but I don't think you should pay for editing unless you fail dozens of times trying to get traditionally published. I can teach you through this master class of self-editing how to be a ferocious self-editor so that you're happy with every word before you transmit it to a publisher or to a potential agent.
Yeah, and it's a lot of hard work, and I think that's why there are so many paid editors out there. It's because people don't want to do that work; they just rather pass it on to somebody else, and that's fine if that's what you want to do. If that's how you want to spend your money, but you still need to learn that art. I think it's an art of self-editing, because then you will start to catch the things even as you're writing. You will catch them very quickly, and you can fix them as you're going along. In addition to later when you're going back through it, that long process of going back through it. There's some others, and you mentioned it a moment ago: thick-skinned manuscript critique. And this is like I do this at writers' conferences where they have that first page critique, and I'm sitting on the panel that is a part of that. And I've always enjoyed it. I like finding the things that work as well as the things that could be improved upon, but you do have to have thick skin. And so I'd love for you to address that.
Yeah, in fact, when I talk about my 21 tips for self-editing, the first one is to develop thick skin. And that is not to say that I've developed a thick skin. I have little tricks there too, where when I do my ferocious self-editing and I submit it to my agent and to the publisher, and then I die 1,000 deaths waiting. If they go one day past when I think they should, I'm thinking, oh, they've discovered now that I'm a fraud, and they're going to say, who told you could write, and this isn't going to work. That hasn't happened, fortunately, but I think the edge it gives you is good. And I never want to cut corners. And so I say, develop a thick skin. Well, when I do get my input back, they'll have a few things where they say, this didn't quite work for me. I needed a little less of this or a little more of that. And my first response, because I'm human and because I'm in the flesh, is to be defensive. And I'll say, how dare they tell me, who've written all these books and sold all these books, I could teach them. I've been teaching writing longer than they've been alive, et cetera, et cetera. And so I discipline myself and say, all right, you can go ahead and wallow in this and be childish, but you get 24 hours and then you respond. And in 24 hours, I come down and I go, okay, so maybe this is a person who was born, in this century, for all I know, and doesn't know what I know, but they're on my team. They want this to be the best it can be. So maybe they have a point. Now, there'll be points in there where I'll go, no, I disagree, and here's why. And because of my experience, they'll go, okay, fine, if that's how you want to do it. But usually I can find some value in every bit of input and say, all right, I can do that. Now, I don't like it because of the amount of time I've spent at this career. I don't want them writing it for me. Now, with some beginners are happy to have them do that and say, look, here's a paragraph that might work better. And they go, great, I learned from that. I just want them to say, give me more of this, or give me less of that, or this seemed tedious, or I lost interest here. And I go, okay, I see that. I rewrite it. and usually that satisfies them. But that's the deal with thick skin. Even if you don't develop the thick skin, discipline yourself to wait and not react in anger or defensiveness.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I love about the way we do things in Word Weavers is that you're not allowed to speak when you're being critiqued. And that allows you just to let it sit and just kind of take it in. And as I always say to Word Weavers members, at the end of the day, it's your baby. You can do with it whatever you want to do. But if 7 out of 8 people just told you that that word didn't work or that paragraph was a rabbit trail, you probably want to listen to them. And I know with me, it seems like with every novel that I write, I have a crutch word. And it's just particular for that novel. And it always comes back to the editor coming back and saying, you use this word 133 times or whatever. And I didn't realize it. But, it's nice to have that person come along and just say, wow, yeah, you're right, I did. And now I need to kind of pare that down just a little bit. And like you said, I mean, we all get that. We can be a #1 bestseller. We can have all kinds of accolades and awards, but we're in the process of writing. We have those moments where we just kind of, dip into the crutch words, or it just wasn't our best day when we were writing and we don't see it. So it's nice to have that. What about of a
I was
best-selling
going to
story?
say, excuse
Sure.
me, that when you talked about pet words or words that you rely on too much, I sometimes get the job of editing other writers, and sometimes, as you say, celebrated, award-winning, best-selling writers. And I was editing one recently, and I realized that this author kept using the word "then," and I wrote to her and I said, everything in a novel happens then. You don't have to say it.
Mhm.
And then I started thinking, this is so common. I wonder how many times. And in a 339-page manuscript, she had used the word "then" over 450 times.
Wow.
So she was thrilled that I caught that, and
Yeah.
we worked on that. But that's a common issue.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm kind of gotten to the point where anytime I turn in the work and I'm waiting for it to come back, it's like, wonder what the crutch word will be this time. There was one book, it was eased. I mean, my character eased up the stairs, eased into the room, eased on the sofa, and then in The One True Love of Alice Ann, it was sweet. There was sweet milk and sweetheart and sweet expression. And I really did not realize I was doing it. But then once she pointed it out, the editor pointed it out, I thought, wow, that's very true. And you can get angry about it if you want to, but the fact remains is I don't need all those sweets in my manuscript. So then what about anatomy of a best-selling story?
I had a lot of fun with that workshop. It's a pretty thorough workshop where we study some of the classics and some of the books that have worked really well in the inspirational market and the general market. And people find that really instructive. They read a book and they go, I love this, and I'm not sure why. And one of the things I teach in this course especially is that people love to be educated and they love to be entertained, but they never forget it if they're emotionally moved.
Oh, yeah.
So go for those 3 E's. You want to educate them, you want to entertain them. But whenever you're trying to decide whether one scene works better than another or one phrase works better than another, go for the one that reaches the heart without being sappy, and you can hardly lose. So there's lots of teaching like that in that course.
I like that. I with my last book, my cousin, I spend a lot of time with my cousin up in Shellman Bluff, Georgia, and she knows I'm an early to bed, early to rise person. And so one night about 11 o'clock, a text came through, and because I had just done an interview, I was just going to bed. And this text said, I hope you're asleep and I hope I woke you up. Because she said, I have cried through the last 4 chapters of this book. And I'm just like, yes, you really want that as a writer. That's a lot of fun. Hey, I like this. This is called The Art of the Start. What is that about?
That is one that simply gets people off the dime. They say, I've had this idea. I've tried to write it, and I don't know where to start. I've got what I think is a good first chapter, and I think I've got a good last chapter. Don't know where to go in the middle, but it's starting that's stopping me. And so we have all kinds of hints and motivation to say, and a lot of it is that, like writing front matter, just do a little bit at first, just to say, all right, I'm going to write, and I love people who do this. I haven't tried it myself, but I have a lot of people who do tell me they'll just take a timer and say, I'm going to write for 15 minutes. And then I can do what I want the rest of the day if I want to. And they write 15 minutes and they go, that wasn't so bad. I'll do another 15 minutes. Some maybe do 15 minutes a day for 4 or 5 days. Then they do a half hour, so tricks like that to get you started, because that's the toughest thing. It goes without saying. If you don't start, obviously you'll never finish. And if you don't finish, you've got nothing to sell to even find out whether you can compete in this marketplace or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Then you just go back to being the dreamer and not the
Yep.
author. Yes. And this is one I find very interesting. This is the last one we're going to talk about, writing for the inspirational market, because it seems to me like I get a lot of questions concerning, well, am I allowed to do this? Am I allowed to say that? I noticed that some publishing houses are allowing for this, but others don't. Let's talk about that. What is this course about?
Yeah, the big thing here is, especially when you're talking about what's allowed and not. People say, is it realistic to write a book, say, like books I've written about a prisoner who's in a maximum security prison, or somebody who works in law enforcement, like my dad and my 2 older brothers did, and not have profanity? Because those professions and those venues are filled with profanity.
Yes.
Now, on the one hand, I say, well, it may not be realistic, but on the other hand, do you want to risk sacrificing a quarter of your readership?
Yeah.
Because the gatekeepers, the owners of Christian bookstores and in the inspirational market, a lot of them will say, okay, some publishers are starting to allow a few, mild epithets, but I'm not going to sell those, or I'm going to put them under the shelf. To me, it's not worth it. I don't want to lose one reader. And I realized, if I was writing for the general market, it would be kind of silly to have a lifer in prison who never says anything but dang, But what I do, the way I run the inspirational market, is to write, he swore, and then quote the next line, or to say he, came out with a stream of expletives that would have embarrassed a longshoreman. Whatever it takes to say that without being cliched, people get it. And a lot of readers, especially the inspirational market, don't want to read the graphic, swearing and all that type of thing. So there are ways around it. There are also things that I think people overestimate on the other side too. They think every Christian publisher would love inside lingo, church language. We're going to talk about somebody who's redeemed by the precious blood of the Lamb. Well, that's a precious line for me. That moves me.
Sure.
But you write that in a book and hope to pass it along to people who are not people of faith. They go, boy, does that sound religious, whatever that means,
Yeah, I don't even know
it
what it
just
means.
doesn't. Yeah. And so unless you have a character that's going to explain that and tell why that's so special, use normal conversational language.
Well, let me ask you one final question, and I think this is the most important one. You've got 71 million copies sold. You're working on your 220th book. I mean, you could just brush your hands off and say, I'm just going to chill with Diana the rest of my life and my grandkids and my kids, and I don't have to mess with all this. So why do this? Why is this so important to you?
Well, one thing is, at the risk of sounding falsely modest, I really believe that I'm mono-gifted. I have a gift for putting words on the page. I don't sing, I don't dance, I don't preach. This is what I do. And so I feel obligated to exercise that gift. And I don't see anything in scripture about retiring. I would be in my own way, let alone in Diana's way. I asked her one time if I should think about retiring, and she said, "From what?" She said, "You love what you do. Is that really
True.
work?" And I admit my pace has changed. I like teaching a lot more now. So instead of writing 4 books a year, as I did for about 40 years, I'm writing 1 or 1.5 books a year, writing only the ones I really want to and really can get into, that I'm writing for my passion. But as far as giving back and teaching, that's strictly a matter of, I feel obligated to do that too. There are people who poured into my life when I was young. When I was 15, I got to meet an idol of mine. He was a writer of sports biographies and things like that and Christian books. And somebody said, well, you want to be a writer when you grow up, you know, you need to meet this guy. And I'd read several of his books. And he was so kind to me that he let that introduction go for like an hour and chatted with me as if I was a pro.
Yeah.
Here are things you might want to do. Here's things you might want to read, things to think about. And I remember thinking at 15, if I ever make it in this profession, I'm going to be as kind to new writers as this guy was to me. So that's really what the guild and these courses are all about.
Yeah, you know, I saw last night on Facebook, you posed that question, and I loved reading some of the answers. They were wonderful. And I feel that same way. It's you know, if God allowed this to happen, then it is about giving back, and there is a joy that's in that. And sometimes I feel that when, like with Word Weavers, when our members become published and then they hit the bestseller list and that kind of thing, I'm celebrating with them. I feel like Mother Hen. You're probably, I guess you would be Father Rooster. I don't know. But I feel like Mother Hen. Hey, you guys, you can go to jerryjenkins.com and click on writing courses and find out more about this. You can find out more about Jerry, find out about his books. And Jerry, I thank you so much for the time that you've given us today. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we say goodbye?
Just to say that I'm honored to be with you. It's always been great to talk to you, and I consider you a great friend. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Absolutely. Well, we're going to end the recording, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye for now.